Welcome to Knit Pickers PEI. I'm Margaret, and today we are going to talk about the I-cord cast off. Now, in previous videos, I've talked about the I-cord cast on, as well as how to do I-cord edgings. So this will wrap up our series on I-cords, and we're going to do an I-cord cast off, knitted version, as well as a purled version. So, shall we get started?
So here's my little swatch, and I started out with an I-cord cast on. It's a 3-stitch I-cord cast on, and I also did my I-cord edges. Now I will put links in the notes below if you want to look up the videos on the I-cord cast on and the I-cord edges. But now we're going to focus on our I-cord cast off. So to start, I'm going to cast on 3 more stitches, and you can do whatever your preference is in terms of casting on. My personal preference when I'm knitting an I-cord cast off is to do the knitted cast on for stitches. So I'm just going to add 3 more stitches. I knit into the first stitch and pop that stitch on. There's stitch number 1. Knit that stitch and pop it back onto the needle for stitch number 2, and I just snug it up a little bit and knit that final stitch for stitch number 3. So I've just added 3 stitches, so we're going to be doing a 3-stitch bind off. So when I do a 3-stitch bind off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches just as you would normally knit them, and then I'm going to knit into the back of the following 2 stitches. So I just slide my needle through the back, wrap it around, and knit it through. And then I take these 3 stitches and I transfer them back on. And once again, I knit 2 stitches because I'm doing a 3-stitch bind off. Whoop, that one split the wool. Let me do that again. So knit 2 stitches, 1, 2, knit into the back of the next 2 stitches. So I'm just coming in, 1, 2, just like that, into the back of those 2 stitches, and once again, transfer these 3 stitches back over. And you carry on all the way to the end. So knit 1, knit 2, knit into the back of the next 2 stitches, and transfer over. And it is just a straight transfer over. You don't want to twist your stitch. So again, knit 1, knit 2, and knit into the back of the next 2 stitches. And you can start to see the I-cord forming right there. And I'll do this one more time, and then we'll move into the purl I-cord bind off. So transfer these 3 stitches over, knit 1, knit 2, knit into the back of the next 2 stitches, and transfer them on over. And there you have it. There is your I-cord bind off. So I'll knit a few more stitches. I'll knit halfway on this swatch with my knitted I-cord bind off, and then we'll switch over to the purl stitch bind off. So here I am, I'm halfway through this swatch. So I've done half of the swatch with the knitted I-cord bind off. And now we're going to do the purl I-cord bind off. So in this case, I've got my original 8 stitches, and if you were starting at the beginning of your row, these would be my 3 additional cast on stitches. So to do the purled bind off, quite simple, you just bring your yarn around to the front as you would for a purl stitch and purl 2 stitches because I'm doing a 3-stitch bind off. So I purl 2 stitches and then I purl the next 2 stitches together. And whoops, I almost forgot. When I'm going to transfer my stitches over to the needle, I move my yarn to the back, I move it to knitting position, and then I transfer my 3 stitches over. And then once again, I bring my yarn around to the front, I purl 2 stitches, and then the next 2 stitches, I'm going to purl them together. Now my yarn is to the back. In knit position, I transfer, a straight transfer, I'm not twisting my stitches at all. Transfer these 3 stitches over, give it a little tug, bring my yarn back around to the front. So I'm wrapping it from where I finished off at that 3rd stitch. I'm wrapping it all the way around and bringing it back to the front. Purl 2 stitches. And then purl 2 together. Bring my yarn to the back, transfer the 3 stitches over, and carry on. So I'm going to do this until I have 3 stitches remaining, and I'll show you how you finish off your row. Now what you do want to keep in mind is whether you're doing the purl I-cord bind off or the knitted I-cord bind off, it certainly does take a lot more yarn than it would if you were just doing a regular bind off. So keep that in mind. You don't want to be playing yarn chicken and running out of wool when you're doing your bind off. So here I am down to the final 4 stitches. So in this case, I am still working on the purl bind off. So I'm going to finish this off in the purl. So I'm bringing my yarn around to the front, purling 2 stitches, and purling these last 2 together. And so I have 3 stitches remaining. And that's what I want. So whether I'm working on a knitted I-cord bind off or a purled I-cord bind off, if I start by casting on 3 stitches, I want to finish by having 3 stitches left on my needle. If I've cast on an extra 5 stitches, I would keep knitting until I have 5 stitches left on my needle. And now, to finish it, all you're going to do is cut or break your yarn and transfer your stitches back over to your left-hand needle. And then with either a bodkin, a yarn sewing needle, or a crochet hook, or in this case, I just use my knitting needle, you're just going to pull that tail through these last 3 stitches. So you see what I've done here? I'm using my knitting needle, but you could use a crochet hook too. You're not knitting it, you're just pulling it through that loop. There we go. 1, 2, and we'll pull it through this last loop right here. But as I say, it's whatever is going to work best for you. If you'd rather take this and slide it through a yarn needle and thread it through your loops, you can do that. If you want to grab your nearest crochet hook and pull it through with a crochet hook, you can do that too. So now we've secured all 3 of our stitches because the yarn has pulled through, and we just snug that right up. And then what I would do is I'm going to take this and I would weave my end in, and there would be my I-cord bind off. So if I bring this up closer to the camera, you can see the knitted bind off has quite a different appearance than the purl I-cord bind off has. They're both thick, they're both chunky, but quite a different appearance. And since this is a little garter stitch swatch, I really do like the way that the purl I-cord bind off sort of mimics the look of the garter stitch. And it has a similar effect on a seed stitch. Although there's absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever with doing a knitted bind off with garter or with seed stitch as well, whatever your preference is. So what is really lovely is you can make your I-cord thinner or thicker. If you wanted to knit a thinner I-cord, rather than casting on 3 stitches at the beginning, you would only cast on 2 stitches. And then rather than knitting or purling 2 stitches before knitting or purling 2 together, you would only knit or purl 1 stitch. And to make it thicker, you can go up to about a 5-stitch I-cord. I wouldn't go any thicker than that because it kind of looks a little messy after that. But if you're knitting or purling a 5-stitch I-cord, you would cast on an additional 5 stitches and knit or purl 4 before knitting or purling 2 together. So cast on 3, knit or purl 2, cast on 4, knit or purl 3, cast on 2, knit or purl 1. It's that simple. Now for me, I really like the knitted I-cord with just about every type of knit stitch. However, the purled I-cord is really, really pretty if your pattern is done in garter stitch or seed stitch. So I hope you'll give it a try. Send me pictures if you do. And in the meantime, happy knitting.